This is Coda Radio, episode 32, for January 14th, 2013. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Salam and good evening, Chris, and welcome to Agrabah.
Good afternoon to you, sir, and I'm talking to you from a snowy Washington right now. It's just started snowing as the show began. So.
Yes, I'm talking to you from a war-torn New Jersey. We are currently knocking down a house 2 doors down from me.
And you're not kidding.
Yes, I am not kidding.
They got condemned, right, from Sandy?
From Sandy, yes, and I guess the town or city or whatever just got around to, well, basically smacking it with a crane over and over again.
Well, so if you hear a little background noise, it's either I've gone off the show's gone off the road because I've hit a snow patch and I don't have four-wheel drive in the studio today, or because the house next door to Mr. Dominic is literally being torn down.
Yes.
It's funny because Sandy has played an interesting role in the show because we recorded an episode of Coda Radio right as Sandy was sort of reaching your coast.
Yeah.
And we've sort of just been following it. And, you got power back right before the show started the next week, or, a little bit before the show started the next week. So it was, just in time to do the show. It's just crazy. It's wild, man. So, I've been following...
She's almost like a guest star. Every couple of weeks, she says, hey, I'm still here.
I've been following I know it's not getting reported on a lot, but I've been trying to follow what's going on over there. So I feel for you. Now, we got a big show today. What are we talking about?
Do it. So today we have user-generated content.
Ooh, and some decent dev hoopla, too.
Oh, more than decent. Just delicious.
All right. So, and we also have a pretty good feedback section. Should we get started with the feedback?
We should. So just a reminder for folks asking why I haven't replied to old emails. Anything before Jan 1, 2013 is under my email Chapter 11. For those of you not in the U.S., Chapter 11 is a form of bankruptcy here.
So if you send something, when's the cutoff?
Jan 1, but it might actually be Jan 4. Whatever, right.
So if they needed a reply, they should resend.
Yep. But if it was something that was super timely, it may not be worth it. But if it's something more general, please send it again.
Yeah, I kind of had to do that too.
Also, if you use the Wufoo form, you're less likely to get slapped by my evil spam filter.
Oh, so the Wufoo form, to translate that, that's when you go and you hit the contact link at the top of Jupiter Broadcasting and fill out the form on our website.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I've let that through explicitly, but sometimes if you're randomly emailing me through Google+, I've been told that it's not exactly getting to where it needs to go.
Yeah, that does happen to me too sometimes. Yeah. I've realized I've gone back and missed a lot of stuff. So yeah.
So the Coda Radio email or the Wufoo form are probably the right way to do it, just to mitigate the risk of the spam filter.
Yeah. All right. The spam filter is strong with us.
Oh, it's like Darth Maul just standing at the edge of my email box.
Now, I think probably I can guess what the thing we got the most feedback on. The topic was probably Ubuntu Phone. I got a couple of tweets, people saying they didn't like it being covered in the show.
Yeah.
And, I kind of felt like there's some, I can see something to that. I think we were looking at it as I think, what, the takeaway I had from it was the bigger story is Qt, really. I mean, it's just a year of Qt, and I think that's the dev story there.
Yeah, that's definitely the dev story, and I think that'll still be an ongoing story this year. But we did get a metric ton of feedback regarding the Ubuntu phone.
Mm-hmm. Where should we start with that? Any thoughts?
Well, what was interesting to me is most people, didn't like that we covered it because they don't like the phone itself, which I found surprising for the JB audience.
Yeah.
I kind of expected some positive feedback on that because... it's Linux, it's Ubuntu. You guys tend to love that stuff.
Right.
Tend to rage on me when I talk about iOS or Android or Mac or Windows.
You just can't win, man.
I just can't win. Apparently I was, just
what I think it is there's nothing immaterial yet.
So, yeah, if you remember, Chris, around Ubuntu, let's say 9.10, 9.04, when I was real into it, Do you remember the Mythbuntu or Ubuntu TV?
Oh yeah.
I still can't purchase one. I still can't purchase an Ubuntu TV, to my knowledge.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of I think there's a lot of sort of like, here's our product, isn't it awesome?
Yeah.
And then nobody bites, and then nothing ever materializes.
And that was a lot of the feedback we got, and I have to agree. And I understand Canonical has a habit of perhaps pre-announcing things before they're really solid.
It's a negotiating. It's their way. They're trying to get in the door. They're trying to negotiate, or draw attention to themselves, so that way somebody will engage a contract with them.
Yeah, and I'll be transparent on this. The reason I covered it was I was a little excited about it, and it dominated my news readers because I follow a lot of open source news publications.
Well, what's interesting is I perceived that your excitement began to wane during the show. Like, as you started to think through it, you're like, this is kind of a non-starter.
It just doesn't make sense, in my opinion, when because Android exists, this really shouldn't. Or it's not viable, I should say.
Yeah, but do you want, well, we don't need to spend another episode on this, but,
right.
That's essentially what it comes down to is in order to supersede the existing market dominator, I mean, you've really got to bring something special.
Yeah, and to Canonical's credit, I mean, their videos obviously had the effect they wanted. They dominated my newsreader, and I'm sure many others. They got a lot of positive press from certainly the Linux open source community, and they even got some mainstream coverage, though that was distinctly less positive. Particularly The Verge, if you looked at them, and Ars Technica wasn't so... They were a bit lukewarm, to say the least.
Well, it was funny. I would actually say The Verge came out first as one of the strongest hypers. And then they later wrote a second piece that said, well, it might be too late. But they were some of the first with the hands-on videos. I mean, they ran with the story for a day pretty positively. And then
The Verge does that, though. They do it all the time with Android apps, too. And then a day later, they're like, oh, but the iOS one's still better. Like, The Verge, and this is important, right, for anybody in the audience, especially our younger listeners. Even if people try to be fair, everyone has a bias. And I think The Verge's bias, if you really follow them, is pretty clear. And I don't know if Chris would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really follow The Verge very closely, so I don't know if I'm comfortable making that statement. I like the pretty pictures they have on their website.
Yeah, their site's beautiful, and I read their site religiously because I think they do get a lot of exclusives. But it's like any other site. TechCrunch, big old bias. Jupiter Broadcasting, big bias. No offense. Love you.
No, you're right. I mean, we look. Yeah. I look at things through a little more independent and practical lens.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the better ones. I'd say some other podcasting networks don't make the effort that you make.
Yeah.
Not going to go into details there, but yeah. It's nothing. It's not to say that these people are necessarily on the take or anything like that, but everybody has experience. Like, for sure, anyone who's been in the Linux community and remembers Microsoft from the 90s is going to be a little skeptical of everything they do.
I agree.
Just like now, when anyone tells me that Apple's changing an API, my immediate concern is, are they deprecating and now throwing out apps that use the old API?
Right.
Because I've been burned before. So this is, over time, people get biases, and they don't mean to. And I don't mean to, attack The Verge. I'm just saying, when you're reading these articles that are super hypey, take it with a grain of salt. And I think that's all we need to say is, until there's a phone, there's no story. And I don't know how Chris feels about that.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a meta story in that you see these alternative platforms that are coming out that maybe the carriers might be able to customize and have some interest in. And I think there's also a bigger story in Qt. And I think the Ubuntu phone story sort of bolsters those stories. So it's not like it's completely irrelevant, but at the same time, until there's an actual product or even an image that I can load on my Galaxy Nexus, until there's an image, it's not really much of a story. Now, my tune might change when I get it loaded on my phone, and I think that's kind of neat. Do I think that it should be as covered as much as it was? No, but maybe that tells us something. Maybe people want an alternative.
Maybe, and we'll see. My line is going to be if I can buy it in a store. But I think we've covered this enough. I mean, there's no news on this per se, so we should just move on to the next feedback. So Chase wants to know what our theme song is, and I forgot the name.
Oh, right. It's called
Gold Spinners.
Yeah, let me see here.
Oh, it's Gold Spinners by Ronald Jenkins.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that song a lot.
All right. So asked and answered. So Swadine has an email that I was going to have you read, but I'm just going to summarize. And sorry, I butchered your name. So he's developing a project for a client in Java, doesn't want to use MySQL for some reason, but does not want to use NoSQL. So I think this was good to mention only because it's very hard for me, and I think anyone, to give firm advice on what you should be developing with about 500 words worth of detail. So the best I can do for you is to suggest that if you don't want to go NoSQL, and you don't like MySQL, which is interesting. I don't know why you don't want to use MySQL. I'd say look at Postgres. There's also SQLite, but I use Postgres. There's also MariaDB, which is the open source MySQL. If your objection is just because it's Oracle, but without that context, it's very hard for me to say. And speaking of biases, I prefer Postgres, so that's why I'm suggesting it.
Yeah, Postgres is great.
Yeah, and Postgres doesn't let you do some of the silly things MySQL does.
Whoa, what's going on with the mic over there?
Ooh, did it just fall? Yes, it did.
It's starting to go on you. Jeez Louise, man. That thing's...
This handle... There we go. Oh, I didn't lock it.
Okay. You know what? Do you have room? Would you have room for an arm stand that goes on the floor? Because I have one I could send you. But it's like a tripod. It has to have like floor space.
I do have room for that.
You know, we might just do a little mic upgrade for you for the new year. Just do a little kit upgrade, huh?
Look at that. Right live on the show. We have it recorded.
we got proof.
And Alan's upset that I call it SQL instead of SQL.
Uh-oh.
SQL's faster, Alan. That's all that matters.
Well, yeah.
All right, so James, who is 14 and British, not sure why that's relevant, has been learning C# and wants to get into game development. So, Chris, we get a lot of these emails.
Yeah, and C# is interesting, though, huh? I mean, because I've heard, honestly, in the emails, I've seen like HTML5 games. I've seen... a
lot of Java.
Yeah, but not really C#.
I imagine his school's teaching C#. Given his age, I have no idea. But there's a simple answer. Take a look at Mono Game. It's a fork of the Mono project. It's XNA ported to Mac, Windows 8, Linux, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think there's already Mono Game games in the Ubuntu Software Center.
Great Scott! Yeah, there are. I can't remember which one it is, but you're right. There is one that.
I think there is. Is it Bastion?
I don't know.
Because Bastion is done with Mono Game for iOS. I know that.
Mono Game is an open source implementation of the Microsoft XNA 4 framework. Our goal is to allow XNA developers on Xbox 360, Windows, and Windows Phone to port their games to iOS, Android, macOS 10, Linux, and Windows 8 Metro. Oh, look at this, dude. Ouya and PlayStation mobile development is currently in progress. They're working. They're already porting to the Ouya. That's kind of compelling. I mean, that's kind of neat.
That's interesting. So they must have just added that because I did not know about the Ouya.
Yeah, and PlayStation Portable.
Yeah, I can tell you I follow them on GitHub. They have a very strong and very, very active community.
Well, this is interesting, yeah, because, I mean, if you go this route, then you could theoretically target just essentially every platform. That's not the web.
Yeah,
that's wow, that's pretty powerful. I can see why he's looking at that.
Yeah.
I wonder how performance is.
It's not bad. I've played a few games written in it. It's like XNA.
Okay.
Right. So.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it would be like XNA, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's you're not going to get your Call of Duty number 73, but you're going to get your Fez, your Bastion, your.
Oh yeah, this is active. They're working on this. Oh yeah.
It's super active. Yeah. Because I follow them on my CodeJournal app, and they constantly have notifications.
Oh, that is so sweet. So you just follow your favorite projects in that thing and just see when they do updates.
Well, because I forked it also.
They have on the monogame.net site, they have some screenshots of some of the games that are written using Monogame. They got an iPad game on here. They got an Android game on here. It's cool.
No, it's a really impressive project, and what's really most impressive is, it's porting a essentially .NET framework, XNA, right? And in that community, open source is kind of a new thing. It's interesting. If you listen to Hansel Minutes or anything like that.
Bastion. It's Bastion that's in the Ubuntu.
It's Bastion. I thought it was Bastion. It's very good. I have that.
Yeah.
And it is on the Ubuntu Software Center as well.
Yep, and
Okay,
what's
perfect.
cool about it is they have links to actually, right there on their site, they have links to all the different app stores you can buy it on, which is neat. That's just a nice little thing to do.
Yeah, honestly, this is a great tool to use, especially if you already work in C Sharp. I don't see a reason to go elsewhere.
Word.
All right, let's do it. So Russell shares a game programming primer that's directed at C++ developers.
Oh,
We have
okay.
the show notes. Just wanted to share that because he asked that other people take a look at it.
All right, so thanks, Russell. We'll have a link to that.
Now, I'm running out of air in my voice, so Chris is going to talk to us about Khalil dropping the atomic bomb.
Oh, okay. So just some numbers I'd like to share. Oh, yeah. So this was interesting. Now, did you catch this on the OMG Ubuntu site? Where did you read this?
So I didn't get this until Khalil sent it to me.
Oh,
I totally missed this story.
okay. All right. So, Cleo writes here, it's just some numbers I would like to share. In the Ubuntu Software Center, the second most sold app for the month of December sold only a mere 148 copies.
Ouch.
Now, here's the thing about that. He was only, oh, geez, OMG Ubuntu site's down right now. It's been down a lot lately. The only,
It's up, dude. Try again.
no, now it's up again. Yeah, nope, now it's down again. It's a hit and miss. He was only in there for 2 weeks. But the fact that he made number 2 at selling 148 copies is pretty depressing.
Yeah, so let me be devil's advocate here since I think you have a position already.
Okay.
What 2 weeks was he in? Was it the first 2 weeks?
It must have been the last 2 weeks of December.
Okay, so he wasn't just a launch title. So theoretically, if it's the last 2 weeks in December, people have already gotten traction with using the Software Center. So that's not good. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And that put him in the number 2 spot.
Well, do you remember the number that kind of got leaked on Google Plus about Super Meat Boy?
77, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was like 77.
Yeah. Again, though, I thought that wasn't too outrageous since you could buy it from the Humble Bundle for about the same price. You could buy just that game, and then you would get DRM-free copies that you could load on any platform. So that made sense to me that it wouldn't sell so well compared to that. But so his app that he had in there was a storm. It's called Storm Cloud. I actually bought it. I'm one of those numbers there, and
One of few, the proud, the 194.
It's actually. I wonder if I could bring up a picture of it because it's funny. It's very Metro looking. It's a Metro looking weather app that sits on your desktop like a title. And oh jeez, no, it's down there too. And anyways, it's not anything super compelling, so maybe that's why it didn't sell extremely well.
Right.
But there's nothing about it that makes it a must-have app other than it's very well done, and I wanted it. So for $3, I figured.
Did you pay for this?
Yeah, I bought it. Yeah, it's
I
nice.
mean, I'm looking at the screenshot, and for people who don't listen live, this is a reason to listen live. It does look very nice. Like that, this guy's design is amazing.
Right, but you see kind of a Metro.
It is definitely Metro inspired.
But it's just a square. It's not like a whole full screen thing.
No,
so it just sits on my desktop in the background, and when I have my windows closed, I glance at it, and I just like it. But I can see why maybe for $3, and that's the minimum price that they let you set. I can see maybe why people haven't bought a lot of it. It's got good reviews. But
so I think the real story is that it made number 2.
Right. I completely agree. I completely agree.
Not that it's. I mean, that is another story. Canonical, and I think this is something people don't know. You cannot sell your app for $1 on the Canonical store, which I think is great. I think $3 is a reasonable minimum price.
See, like Disco's saying, and you pay for that. You see, some people. I think there's a higher. I don't know. I think there's a higher expectation when people are going to pay for software under Linux too.
I think there's a higher expectation on desktop software than on mobile too.
Yeah, and I think also some of it just there's a lot of different layers here. So one layer is the software center is slow and kind of clunky. The second layer is the buying process sometimes takes too long, and sometimes I randomly have to give it my shipping address to buy a digital app. And then the third layer that sits sort of underneath all of that is that it kind of, in a sense, although I can go find them in my op directory, locks me into Canonical and future versions of Ubuntu. And, not everybody's comfortable with every decision Canonical makes. Sometimes people don't want to make that long-term commitment. They'd rather just buy directly from the developer. And then the last point I will make is I have been burned slightly by buying some apps on 1204 that weren't quote-unquote certified to work on 1210, when all is to be certified for 1210. You just have to resubmit for 1210 and have it tested, even if the app works
you
fine.
can't fault the developer for that.
No, exactly.
Canonical's policy is stupid,
right.
and that's
so that burned me though, because I bought something under 1204, upgraded 1210, and then I couldn't install it on my new system. And I was, but there was no technical reason for it.
No, that would be like on the Mac App Store, them saying, "Oh, gee, you submitted your app under Lion, so we're gonna go ahead and hide it for Mountain Lion users because you didn't resubmit it." It's exactly like that, actually, except Apple doesn't do that. And what's interesting is I even checked up on the Windows Store. No one else does that but Canonical. So when they patch the OS, they don't make you resubmit your app.
There's a lot of library changes between distro releases and things like that. But, I mean, it's a tough line to walk for them, and they want to guarantee compatibility, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think that's where they're going with all their HTML5 QML stuff. Wouldn't you agree? If they can guarantee that they'll support QML and HTML5 in every release, then they don't have to have you resubmit. I think the problem is now you may have built your app on, let's say, Java, which they can no longer prepackage. Or they may have built your app on Mono, which they definitely don't prepackage. So they need you to resubmit to get that reinstall process so apt-get can get the dependencies. I think that's what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that might be just yet another argument for a, quote, blessed development platform.
I think it's coming. I think it is
right, because if they say, if you write it in Qt, we promise every version of Ubuntu ships with Qt, then there's no need for this resubmission stuff.
Right.
Because there is a technical limitation now that we really parse it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's that since it's a free-for-all and you can build on any dependency you like, apt-get needs to check for the dependency. Now some people are saying, why can't they prepackage OpenJDK? They can, but they can't prepackage Oracle JDK, and a lot of folks still use that.
So, I mean, back to the main point here. The fact that this is a number 2 selling app with, what was it?
194.
That's just...
148. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 148. Not even 150 copies. This is, I think, a really bad news.
So if this is true, which I
think this might be some of the worst news for the Ubuntu desktop that I've heard in a long time.
This is far lower than I would like to see, for sure.
And I mean, I doubt that the number 1 position is thousands and thousands. I mean, it's possible there's a huge...
let's say the number 1 position is 10 times as many. That's still not great for the top paid app.
Yeah,
I don't think that's possible. But even giving them the benefit of the doubt, that's really not... let's say you sell your app for $3 a pop and you sell 1,000. That's $3,000. That's not going to support continued development for very long.
Yeah. That's... Yeah, that's not good for developers, and that's not good for Valve either.
So, I'm not sure about that. I can't, and I don't, and maybe because you might know a little more about what Valve's doing on Linux than I do. Are you sure this isn't a canonical problem, and not a? Because I'd like to think that the Linux user base isn't just not purchasing software because they don't want to purchase software. I'd like to think that there's something about the Ubuntu store that just isn't clicking.
It's definitely possible. I think the Apple stores and Amazon have taught us that if you make that buying process really easy, people buy. And I think that plays a big part of it. So, Valve is working to bring that with Steam. And maybe they're also, I don't know if you've caught this, they're also talking about now working at abstracting out the packaging layer of it so that...
I heard a rumor. Is that actually true?
Well, a Valve developer was asking for input on the Steam for Linux forums. And, he's saying, hey, we're thinking about where we're going to write a script that will just hand it off to a distro, to the distro to handle this, and then it'll bring it back to us, kind of almost like a packaging API, but it's really just a really fancy script. If they did that, then they really could do a cross-platform application store, and Steam already is selling non-games, too. So you got to wonder if that would work.
That might, and if you notice in the chat room, we've already got a few people griping about the experience of using the Ubuntu Software Center.
Yeah, I gripe, too.
Yeah, so the packaging situation is currently a problem, and I think Linux users, more so than Windows or Mac users, hop between operating systems. I mean, for the sake of argument, let's consider Fedora and Ubuntu a different operating system. They're not, of course, but for the sake of packaging applications, they might as well be when you're tied to an app store, right? So it's the same as if right now on the Ubuntu Software Center, It's going from Ubuntu Fedora is the same effect as going from Mac and having bought something to Windows. You just can't take it with you.
Yeah, it's a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could
And I think
actually dig around in your /op directory and back up all the stuff you've purchased and move it with you. And it should be essentially binary compatible with any other distro, but you might just have to manually install the dependencies from that distro's repo.
so. If you're going through that trouble, why even use the Software Center?
Yeah.
I mean, why not just buy it from the developer site or some other third party?
Yeah.
venue?
Yeah, well, I think that's what a lot of people I think that's what a lot of people figure. Yeah, I don't know. So
Yeah, I don't.
I'm looking at Software Center statistics that were provided to me by Zane in the IRC chat room right now.
Okay.
And I don't really have enough time probably to digest them, but he's kind of broken it down by days that apps have been featured and sales and things like that. So I'll dig through this, and yeah, he's really got some amazing statistics here. I'll have to have him share this with you because this is really impressive. And I think I don't know if it's okay if I share this on air, but maybe next episode.
Maybe next episode we can get some more data.
Yeah, this is some serious data here.
And what's also interesting is that Canonical hasn't really been touting the success of the Software Center.
Well, I don't know if there has been a success.
Right. And that's what I'm wondering. Is it because this 148 number seems damning?
I agree. Now, see, this information that Zane has provided is incredible. So he's got it broken down by ratings versus sale price, with the categories. So we'll get some more information on this, and we'll kind of get this broken down because I think you might be onto something. And I think if that now we have Super Meat Boy, we have this, now we have these numbers. We're gonna start getting an idea, and we'll start putting a picture of what it looks like for developers. And then if we see Valve successful, if we see Steam successful on Linux, I think that will sort of answer this question: is this a canonical problem? Is this a Software Center design? And we've also, by the way, heard rumors they're rewriting the Software Center.
That I've heard, and I really hope it's true, and it probably is because they have to be aware of some of the you want my shipping address for Super Meat Boy?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, some of the strangeness that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just overall performance and browsing is just not super great. And
occasionally, I mean, I don't know. I'm running in a VM, but occasionally it freezes up on me. Which maybe that's VMware, but
maybe. I also feel like I start to distrust it after about 2-3 months of a release. Where I'll give you an example. I needed to get a video encoder called like Arista. I went to the developer site because I was like, it's been a few months since 12.10 released. It's probably not the most current version of the Software Center anymore. So
yeah, I'm getting back into just buying software from individual developers via their websites.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can hear the construction workers shouting outside my house.
Yeah.
They're very active Coder Radio.
They are. They just want to kind of guest star a little bit.
Well, what happened is the foreman bought Super Meat Boy and then found out what happened, and he's just really upset. So he's knocking down that guy's house.
Oh man. Well, so should we move on?
Let's move right along to the Dev World hoopla.
Wait a minute. You're gonna skip over your update you did? You don't want to mention that?
Oh, I forgot.
You should. You should give yourself a plug because this is a great app.
So that's right. So CodeJournal, the GitHub quote client for Linux, for Mac, for the GitHub.com source control system, can we call it that now?
Sure.
Has been updated to do some very important things. Handle when GitHub seems to be going down more often.
Oh man, good idea.
Because that cost me a star.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's now a few features people have been asking for. The biggest one is auto login if you consistently use the same account. You can turn it on, turn it off. It's very simple. Minor UX overhaul, some performance increases. That's about it. Now the App Store users are getting the shaft yet again. I had to pull down the submitted update for 1.2.4 to get this, which is 1.2.6. So they're currently 3 versions behind because 1.2.6 is still waiting for review.
If you could snap your fingers and have it show up in the Ubuntu Software Center, I bet this would become a #1 seller.
So today is the 14th, and I was hoping to release the Linux version today.
Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth, really?
There are 2 reasons I'm not. The biggest one is it's not done.
Well, okay, that's a good reason.
I, once again, wrote it in mono and hate it.
Really? Really?
It's slow, and it doesn't look good. I'm going to pick up the Qt prototype again.
Ooh!
The other reason is I'm a little nervous about the Ubuntu Software Center. And most of my plans were based on that.
You could sell direct too, though.
I think I'm going to sell direct, but then I have to handle packaging and
Well, why not do both?
I don't. So this is a little inside baseball. I don't think I'd ever do both again. So if you look at the Mac statistics, I have 50% App Store users and 50% direct users. Now, what was really interesting is when it first released on the Mac App Store, for about a month, direct sales just died. Then when the updates started going really slow, I think folks decided to, as I talked about it on the show, and as I think I posted some things on my blog about why the Mac version was so far behind, Mac sales died.
You mean direct sales or store sales? Store sales. Okay.
App Store sales. And just for this kind of app that's built on someone else's service that I don't necessarily control,
you need to be able to move, right? You gotta be able to update.
Like the issue with with GitHub having some issues recently in the last month. If you haven't been following, they've gone down several times. It cost me some ranking and my rating on the Mac App Store because folks got pissed.
Which then makes it so that way you're not as easy to find.
And I had and those, of course, they're App Store users, so they decided not to email me. So I have no way of contacting them. So that's unfortunate. It dropped the ranking of full star. For direct sales users, I'm able to push out a fix. Because remember, GitHub going down, I can't control.
Yeah.
And sure, it was an oversight, but the fact that it takes over a month to get a new version of the app. So one thing that's fun on the Mac App Store, you can't submit concurrent updates. So what happened is the 1.25 had the fix for GitHub being down. But then the 1.26 had the new features and some other optimizations. So in order to update to 1.26, I had to cancel the submission of 1.25. Yes. So it restarts the clock.
Oh, no!
Right.
That is so frustrating.
So I'm a little sour on the whole App Store things for a product like this because, a whole star loss is a pretty big loss. So if you do like CodeJournal and you do use it on the App Store, please rate it 5 stars.
Yeah, help offset that little. It's such a shame that users don't know better. When GitHub goes down, why punish the front end application?
Well, it's to their credit. A lot of the listeners who bought direct emailed me. It was like, "Hey, it's not working," but then I went to GitHub and it's down. Is that why?
Well, yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah."
That's kind of how that works.
Sorry. I should have had a little graphic of maybe a crying octocat or something funny.
Yeah.
But instead, it is a bug and it is my fault. But the fact that there was no support communication from the App Store users ended up having a real cost.
Yeah.
So roundabout, I think I may become one of those direct sales hippies.
And not like you can't always try something later.
Right, which means I'm going to have to build up a little more infrastructure for payment processing that I'm currently using.
But if they ever did rewrite the Software Center, it'd be you could always at that time choose to all right, well, I want to be in there as one of the new launch apps, for the new version of the Software Center, and then you could always submit it then, or so you could do it strategically
Yeah, and I think the other thing is Qt is right now in a period of rapid evolution, rapid change.
Mm-hmm.
I like where it's going, but I'd like it to stabilize a little.
That's understandable. Yeah. That's understandable.
So that's where we are. So it's a give and take. Definitely I would say anybody who's doing a desktop application. So one of the other issues with the App Store is, of course, the limitations, and that's actually held back the direct sale version.
Like the sandboxing and the whatnots.
Sandboxing, certain requirements about how you have to handle background processing. It's a little annoying.
Oh, really? They're actually mandating how you handle background processing on a desktop computer?
They mandate how much you can do when the user closes the app within that first minute.
Interesting.
Right.
Wow, so they really get involved with how applications behave on the Mac, don't they?
So one of the issues is if you're uploading something big through the client and you have a bad connection, Apple will literally cut off the upload.
What does that in OS X? What's making these decisions?
It's just the rules. If you don't, I have to cut it off, but if you don't abide by the rules,
I see.
They throw you out.
Oh, okay. Wow. I mean, I could never picture another platform doing that.
Right. So the effect for the user is that, this didn't work, and I thought it did.
This almost makes sense on a mobile device. It makes sense maybe like on an Xbox 360 or the PlayStation, but on a desktop computer that ships with maybe 4 to 8 gigs of RAM. And, quad core processors? What are we talking about here? What, really?
It's a little silly, and it almost never happens because, of course, this is all text. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very strange. But anyway, moving on to the hoopla.
Well, the hoopla kind of fits in with what, you're talking about 1 star. You're talking about people are incorrectly reviewing you, like when a GitHub outage comes out. Well, Google's trying to address that, aren't they?
So Google's taking an interesting move. They're forcing real names on the App Store, which they did, was it 3 weeks ago already?
I think it was. Yeah, I think that's when I did my first real name review.
And now they're they're allowing developers to reply directly on the page to people reviewing and perhaps flaming their application.
So you can go back now and respond to a bad review.
Yeah, so I'm of mixed feelings about this. Given the scenario I just told you about CodeJournal, I would have loved to have been able to go into iTunes and be like,
hey guys,
listen, I'm sorry you had a bad experience. Unfortunately, GitHub has been down for the last 6 hours. I'm not affiliated with GitHub. I can't really help you. I'm in the same boat as you. Until GitHub is up, I can't do anything. And I think that's a perfectly appropriate solution because hopefully people will stop raging at you. I have a feeling a lot of perhaps less mature developers will just rage out.
Yeah, I mean, because you take it personal. It's your baby. Right. Somebody's in there pooping on it.
And there's nothing wrong. I mean, I understand taking it personally. And I understand getting frustrated with people who don't understand why things are the way they are.
Now, Google's been experimenting with this with their quote-unquote top app makers for a little while. Like, they gave
Gameloft and yeah.
Yeah, they gave the few privileged access to this back in June.
Shane Q from the chat's like, really? Excuse me while I go yell at some users.
Well, wow. I mean, right, though? I mean, how do you... yeah. So what do you think?
How do you resist that? That's the thing. How do you...
Do you think this is going to become a crap storm, or do you think it's going to go okay?
I think it's going to be a crap storm. Because the problem is, and I can tell you from CodeJournals and other apps I've done, there's no such thing as a 3 or 4 star review. There's 1 and 5.
Yeah.
So...
everything's got to be dramatic, right?
Right. And the people who give you a 1 star don't just hit the 1 star button. They have their little speech, and sometimes they're wrong. Like, I've had people complain that it doesn't work with Beanstalk app, which is not GitHub. So, or my favorite was it doesn't look like a Moleskine journal. There are people who are just off base. Unfortunately, I don't know that going down to their level and ripping them apart publicly is the right way to handle this. And I think that's what a lot of developers are going to do because it's very frustrating. Especially, if your app is free or $1 and people are giving you a hard time about 1 or 2 bugs.
Right.
I mean, there are bugs in Call of Duty and that's millions of dollars.
Right.
And I understand the frustration if you're one guy and there's a little bug or there's a little performance issue and people are making a big deal out of something that's really nothing. It could be hard.
Why do you suppose Google's doing this? Is Google doing this just to have a competitive advantage over the other app stores? Or do you think maybe there's an opportunity here to engage in troubleshooting? Well, could you tell me, I'm sorry to hear it crashed. Could you tell me which crappy Android device you have? And then maybe because, that's usually what it is like when an app crashes, somebody has a low end.
Yeah, I think some developers will use it like that and it'll be great. I think others won't, right? So that's going to be the problem. I think Google's trying to clean up the Google Play Store. And, first step, real names, so you're less likely to say horribly offensive things. Because it's attached to your name.
Your picture's there. Kind of like Facebook comments on TechCrunch.
Right, exactly. You'll keep it cleaner.
Yeah.
And maybe even this whole bimodal 5 to 1 star thing will stop and people will be like, okay, it's 3 stars, 3.5, 4 stars, or whatever. But I'm afraid, because of the openness of getting a Google developer license, I'm afraid for a lot of younger developers, or even folks my age, who it's really easy to get angry. And it's really easy to sometimes go overboard.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that one.
Especially if you think you're being treated unfairly or I can think of a number of cases where this wouldn't have been a good thing for me in the past.
Now, Bryant in the chat room points out maybe a good perspective. He says one nice thing about it too is the user will probably get a notification that they've been replied to. So if you fix a bug that they've complained about, when you notice and come back, and you can change the review if they reply to you. So you'll say like, ah, man, this thing does this. X developer replies, says, hey, I fixed it. Thanks for letting me know. Maybe a user could change it from a 1-star to a 4-star because, if you feel like you've engaged with that developer. What I've noticed a lot of times is when I get trolled hard and I just like engage with them and I respond and I reply, usually eventually after a few exchanges, somebody's like, oh, yeah, sorry, man, my bad. I was just kind of having a bad day, so it seemed worse than it really was.
Well, I mean, I've gotten a few emails for the show like that, where people...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's certainly I intend to use this feature in that way. But I'm just afraid that too many of the comments are going to get really, Fortran-y really quick. Because at some point, when you're only making 99 cents a unit or $0 a unit,
right.
People kind of need to shut up.
Are you sure they're not tearing down your house?
Feels like it, doesn't it?
Do you actually feel it in like the floorboard?
I don't know. They're wearing black turtlenecks and jeans.
Huh.
The wrecking ball says 30 days or better. Oh. No, but you see where I'm coming, right?
I do.
It's interesting. Like, folks are holding these $1, $2, $5 apps to the standard of $60 Xbox games.
I agree. So I kind of look at it from the perspective of somebody who's see, podcasting and shows and YouTube videos have always been like this. There's always been the two-way comment system, and while there's no like rating and reviews that get impacted that like affect the discoverability of my show, other than the downvotes on YouTube, it would seem to me like I've always had to walk the line of not raging out on somebody when somebody's just patently wrong about something and really just kind of being trolly. Because I kind of, it's my public image that I don't want to come across as an arrogant jerk. So I have walked that line, and it's never really been too bad. It's like as long as you just use good judgment, it works out fine. But people do have to keep in mind that review and that star rating can affect the visibility of that app. So it's a little more than just
it's
ego.
Not a can. It absolutely does.
Right. So it's a little more than just, hurt my feelings. It's a little more than, oh, this guy's wrong, I got to correct him. It's actually more like, hey, you could actually affect my income stream a little bit here. So I can see why it's a little more important.
And actually, it would be nice if the review system was good. Like if people... the problem is with the bimodal system, anybody who doesn't like anything gives you 1 star. So then you have to go, when certain users like it, every time you release an update, hey, can you guys go 5-star it, please? To make up for the 3 jerks. It would be nice if everybody was just honest, and because then your average review would be 3 to 4 stars for most apps.
Do you think that's because those users don't understand really how that system works, and they don't really kind of understand the full ramifications?
Well, on the Mac side, I found they don't understand some of the limitations of the way the Mac App Store works. Like, straight out, they don't. Which is unfortunate, because then it comes down to, well, I can't help you. I think this might actually be better on Google Play than anywhere else because of the variance in the devices. Right? I mean, how many times, and this has happened to me when I've worked on Android projects, you get somebody raging out because the app doesn't work, and the off chance they get in touch with you is because they have some knockoff Android device that has like no RAM. And
right, exactly. I mean, and I just say this from the perspective of I have to take support calls for this client that has a web app that constantly we have all kinds of weird issues where different Android devices freak out when the browser does some sort of weird thing that the phone just doesn't, like, it crashes for whatever reason on the phone. It's like the web browser. It's weird, but even the smallest minute like video driver differences sometimes cause us to hit these weird bugs.
It's true. By the way, it's been about 15 minutes since Shane Kufel's not back, so I'm wondering how many people he's currently yelling at. Is he just going down the comment history?
He's got like 20 tabs open, and it's just, each one, I'm going to get this guy.
It's just like, revenge. No, it's very... Honestly, I think what's going to happen is Google will probably do this and then start taking the right away from developers as they do stupid things. Because they've already proven they can turn it on and off for some developers, right?
I could see that, yeah.
So maybe it'll be an everybody can do what they want, but the minute you do something jerky, silence.
The flip side is it could be really successful, and maybe the other app stores will adopt it.
Apple will never ever do it.
If they do, though, and I could just be being a jerk when I say this, but if am I incorrect in the statement that Google really hasn't pioneered any new kind of shopping experience through their store, through their Play Market? There's pretty much so far a copy of whatever other app store does, right?
Yeah, so this is where they're really...
This is kind of new for them. So if the other app stores take this on, this would be Google kind of leading this area.
And Alex in the chat room is mentioning, don't I see that developers that yell at their users will lose? Yeah, obviously that's not good for business, even if it's not on an app store, right? Even when I got the, let's say, misguided Moleskine book request, I was polite about it. And I explained why it was a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they'll lose, professional developers won't yell at their users generally.
Oh, right.
It's going to be the college developers, the My First App people.
The new guys, yeah. They're heavily emotionally invested in a project that they're probably just dumping themselves into.
Right. And that's, you know, apps don't live forever generally. You pull them after a while, especially on mobile. Especially, you know, those free apps that you do as your first project. You end up pulling them because the maintenance cost is too much. And I think those are the guys that are going to get upset. You know, they're going to be in college. It's going to be... Perhaps they have unrealistic expectations of success in the App Store. Yeah, like, certainly you're never going to see Fingertip Tech yelling at you in Google Play, which would be my company. You're never going to see, Activision yelling at you.
Right.
But you might see, John Smith, developer from Rutgers University, is really upset that you said something perhaps overly critical or off color. And that's fine. I mean, that problem will solve itself.
We should just kind of watch and see where it goes. I think it's an interesting experiment to see.
I think it's a good move. Ultimately, I mean, I think there's going to be a little bit of friction, but it's a good move. And, I'm not a big company. I don't have a PR department, but I love getting user emails, even if they're critical. Because it's feedback, right? Especially if you're a one-man band. There are just things I simply can't see in my testing. Things I simply can't think of because I'm one guy. Mm-hmm. And I have a specific way I use things. Perhaps other people are using it differently than I did.
I think the whole review, and maybe we should probably move on, but I just think the whole review system is so back-asswards because a bad review, and some app stores filter for this. In fact, I think they all do now, but
right.
One review can be like, oh man, this thing crashes, blah, blah, blah. And it could be for 2 releases ago. Really not still relevant to the current release of the application, but that's still there in the history, and potentially still impacting the rating. And I just find that, like, I just wish there was another formula to do this. Like, so maybe, like some sort of math formula based on purchase versus refund rate. And the ones that are purchased the most and not refunded get higher rankings. Or I don't know. This is something that just didn't involve cranky humans.
Yeah, I also think trials would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, except for the trials, I gotta say, man, the trials on Windows 8 suck so bad. So I don't really use Windows 8 at all, except for for a few bursts at a time. And so I was going through the store. I'm like, oh, I'll try this app. I'll try this app. I'll try this app. The trial starts from the moment you click the button. So I downloaded 3 trial applications and then restarted the computer. Came back like, 2 weeks later, whatever it was. Fired up Windows 8 to test something again. Couldn't use any of my apps. Trial expired across the board. Now I can never try them again. I can uninstall them. But it sucks. Like, the whole trial system, that implementation of it is not a good system, so people should not copy the Windows.
I haven't seen that issue, but I've only done trials for games, and I've played them generally immediately from...
Yeah, if you play it right away, it's fine, but the
trial... my point... Okay, so the implementation can be bad. My point is that the trial system has got me to purchase games I probably wouldn't have without it.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And Shane Q-Full would like us to know that he didn't actually yell at anyone. He was very cordial. That's fine. Good work.
Good job, Shane.
All right, so the live stream had asked us to talk about Qt a bit versus Cocoa.
Yeah.
I'm going to change what they asked, because I think comparing 2 frameworks is kind of
it's like
silly.
Because it depends on the job, right? Depends on the app, depends on your goal.
It depends on the goal, and I mean, Qt is basically designed for cross-platform. Cocoa is designed to be super not cross-platform.
Right.
I obviously have a preference. I like Cocoa because I like Objective-C and I like the way Cocoa does things. But I think the way to look at this is when would you use Qt over Cocoa if Mac is your only targeted platform, or perhaps one? I mean, it's pretty obvious if Mac is just one platform you're targeting over others, you use Qt just to hit the other platform.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing is you can access a bit of Cocoa with C++, but the UI stuff, so AppKit, and particularly UIKit for mobile, really you need to be using Objective-C. So that's one area where, if you're not comfortable with Objective-C but are comfortable in C++, Qt is going to be a better choice. Because obviously, for those of you who don't know, the languages are different. If you're not developing on a Mac, developing Cocoa is essentially impossible. GNU Step is so far out of date and kind of not well maintained that
sad.
I tried to get it running, and I did eventually get it running, but it was out of date and it was very, very janky.
Very ugly. So sad.
Yeah, and at that point, you might as well just use Qt or something else. I spent a whole night setting that up. It wasn't worth it. I think the hope in the chat was that I would rage about how wonderful Cocoa is. But the truth is really it's the right tool if you're going native Mac, and if you're... one of the unfortunate things about that market is people who purchase Mac software are really into their Macs generally.
It's a more, I would argue maybe in a lot of cases it's a more engaged purchase. You're making an active purchase decision where you're not just buying a computer, you're buying a specific kind of more expensive computer. And I'm not even trying to say those people just have more money and want to buy fancy things. I'm saying you've sort of bought into an idea and you want to see that played through, I guess. Am I making sense?
Yeah, generally folks who are buying Macs not as tools, so like I'm a developer, I use Macs, but I use other machines, but folks who are really into the whole Mac user thing, mm-hmm. they really want, even all the view transitions to be native Cocoa. Mm-hmm. And they can tell the difference, many of them. Mm. And if that's the market you're hitting, then Cocoa is probably the way to go. Now, having said that, of all the cross-platform tools I've looked at, Qt is actually one of the best.
And it's just got a great future ahead of it, too.
Yeah, so it's a little weird to be making definitive statements about Qt right now because it's in a... I mean, this is a very volatile time for it, and it's definitely growing.
Yeah, but it's been around for a long time, too. So, I mean, it has a good, solid history, but it also has a good, solid future with a good, solid path to, really building itself an incredible amount of relevancy. To me, if I'm gonna invest in learning something and building on something that I have to maintain for a few years, that's exactly what I want to see. And I know I'm not an expert on this topic, but that's what I would be wanting to look for.
Yeah, and I think Qt, it's going to be one of those projects. It's kind of a community project, but it has a corporate back, and I think it's going to be fairly stable and fairly well maintained, which is important. Cocoa is obviously backed by Apple, and it's not going anywhere.
Until they change their mind.
Don't say that. Don't say that. That would be heartbreaking.
I write all my apps with Carbon, so I don't know what your problem is.
Oh, you're gonna lay that Carbon crap on me. Here we go. I had some guy flame me on Stack Overflow. Just because it's not in Cocoa doesn't mean you have to do it that way. You can do it in Carbon.
I do Carbon.
I could do it in Carbon, or I could not. Sorry, that's a little... So, before I get the angry email, there's nothing wrong with Carbon. I just prefer not to look backwards. Which is actually a good point about Qt, right? So Qt 5 just came out. If you're doing a project, forget about Qt 4.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you.
Because Qt 5 is so improved and has so many nice quality of life improvements. Maybe we should even cover it one day, but it's one of the reasons I'm delaying the Linux version of CodeJournal, because they even have a pretty video.
Yeah, I started just to look at it. And, whenever you got a video, that gets my attention.
Chris likes his multimedia. He really just gets drawn right in.
I am a fan of the multimedia. You're right about that.
Now, Qt is also going to mobile. So Cocoa does have Cocoa Touch, which is in mobile. But
going
Qt
to mobile
really...
big.
Actually, I think the big thing for the JB audience is you don't have to buy a Mac to use Qt.
That's a plus.
That's probably a big plus. It's native C++. It uses QML, which, if the Ubuntu phone ever ships, will be really, really big.
And as well as the KDE Desktop and Plasma Active, they're all using QML.
What is this? What is this KDE?
It's something new.
Something. Something new. But yeah, I mean,
It's
I'll
a
ask the
desktop
chat.
for Windows 7 fans. Oh shit! I said that. I have Tourette's, so don't take what I say seriously.
I mean, one thing they're asking in the chat is, what would effect will Qt have on the future of Java desktop development? Is what I'm assuming they mean. I have a feeling a lot of folks are going to move over to Qt, and I don't have a reason to back that.
Well, it makes sense.
It's just Java's cross-platform, but Qt is a bit more cross-platform. And I feel like the Java client-side development toolchain, particularly around developing user interfaces, has become a bit stale.
I don't know if you noticed either, but Java had a really, really bad week. So
really, what happened?
Again, another 0 day, and this time the Department of Homeland Security issued press releases and emails and notifications about the problem, and it was covered on CNN News.
Yeah.
I mean, this time Java has really, really, really taken a beating.
You have to imagine there were some fairly stern dudes with badges and black suits in the Oracle offices this week.
Oracle released an update today.
Oh, I bet they did.
They released it today. So, I think people are getting tired of the crap. And I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised.
Let's be fair, right? I mean, a lot of these exploits are around using Java applets, which are so old. And honestly, in good faith, you should not be deploying a Java applet to anybody in 2013.
Absolutely correct. If you disable Java in the web browser, you safeguard yourself from the vast majority of this.
And honestly, you shouldn't have Java in the web browser anymore. There's no reason. Listen, when I was writing Java applets, it made sense at the time, right? Because the web browser couldn't handle, there was no HTML5. Now those type of plugin technologies don't make sense. You don't need Silverlight. You don't need Flash. You don't need Java.
Yeah.
And those are your biggest attack vectors. Silverlight less because it's less used, but Java and Flash.
For sure, yeah.
There are a lot of these Java applets I see could be done in HTML5. The development costs might be higher.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. The talent isn't there yet. But I think really complex HTML5 stuff still takes.
Oh, it's expensive. I've written the estimates. It's very expensive, and people do have sticker shock.
Yeah.
But like anything else, as time goes on, the tools are going to get better, so it's going to become a bit cheaper.
See, I just look at Qt. If you had one other big platform adopt Qt, or I mean, how long till we see? It doesn't really matter. I mean, you're going to see Qt working on Android. BlackBerry's going with it. I mean, all of the little guys are going to band together and standardize on Qt 5 and QML. That's big. That's big. Even that's going to cause some sort of change regardless. Then you have this anti-Java momentum that really seems to be building and even going mainstream.
The problem is the anti-Java momentum is anti-Java. It really should be anti-Java applet. There's nothing wrong, and I'm seeing too much of this, I'm not using Java at all for anything. Well, Java is still a great server-side language. It balances performance to a point. It's certainly more performant than Ruby or Python with developer productivity. So for your backend, for your, let's say you're using Java Play, Java 2E, God rest your soul. It's not, the JVM is certainly not dead, and the JVM is in good shape. Java, the language, is not dead. It's in pretty good shape. These Java applets, this should have stopped in the year 2007. Literally, this should never have been a discussion. And the reason is, I'll be honest, it's cheapness, right? This is a purely, economic problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was a little ranty, but a lot of these Java applets aren't new either.
They're repurposed, yeah.
Right. They're the same code because the company paid $10,000 10 years ago.
Exactly. That also...
and this is an issue I have a lot, especially on mobile, where the OSs are revved so quickly. Sometimes the biz dev types think that their investment is going to last them for 10 years. And the truth is they're lucky if it lasts them 2 years, especially in a space that's moving so quickly. Browsers, mobile, I mean, those are some, and they'll do anything they can to cling to it, and this is the after effect.
And I think maybe some of the anti-Java momentum honestly comes from a little bit of bad corporate karma that Oracle and Larry Ellison personally have built up over the years. People do not really like Oracle as a company.
For sure, but these exploits would exist if Sun still owned it, right?
Right,
I mean,
but the
this is not.
anti-Oracle sentiment in the tech community sort of, I think, amplifies the anti-Java coverage a little bit. I think it compels people to cover
Yeah.
Java stories negatively, things like that.
I mean, I will have to say on my Ubuntu, I say machine, but because for those of you who missed a few shows, my Dell XPS was inadvertently destroyed. So now my Ubuntu rig is a VM. It is a little annoying to get Java running because Oracle decided to be difficult. So I've actually defaulted to the OpenJDK for that. Yeah, certainly there's a little Schadenfreude here, right? The tech media loves to take a stab at Oracle.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, that doesn't excuse blame from the folks who are still running these 10-year-old Java applets.
Right. There's no excuse.
Right.
Malpractice. I mean, they're just not lazy. It's putting your own users at risk when you do it. It's irresponsible.
Yeah, it's flatly irresponsible. I mean, I don't think if we could somehow get Larry Ellison to come on the show and say, Larry, at Oracle, you guys run a lot of Java applets, right? He'd probably say no.
No, but that's no way, no.
Yeah, or he'd say, well, for our intranet only, right? And maybe they run them with a little bit of some kind of security, maybe on internal system only, no network access. So one thing to kind of jump onto the chat. So Java can also refer to the platform and the language. So one thing of interest is the Java platform, the JVM, is actually experiencing quite the boom right now, right? The Scala community is growing very quickly, and I wish I had the article, but I read last week that the Scala jobs are multiplying at a rate very quickly, almost at the rate of mobile developers, and their pay is actually getting pretty high. Higher than your average developer, for sure. There's also, if you're talking about the Java platform, the JVM, there's, of course, Grails, Jython. Grails is the Ruby on Rails equivalent. Jython is kind of like Python. There's a lot going on in the Java ecosystem, more than the Java language. And there's more than just these applet issues, which are certainly severe. But, to typecast it as, oh, everybody stop using the JVM is not actually right.
I like it, dude. You go against the grain and you take a stand, and you're right.
Well, I mean, I understand, right? For ours and for TechCrunch, it certainly sells.
Right, it does.
Click impressions.
Yes.
And I agree. Listen, Java does not run in any of my browsers.
I also believe there are radio personalities out there who cover it to sort of generate. Scaring people generates ratings. And so if you kind of tell people, hey, I'm telling you about stuff you really need to be worried about here, I'm trying to scare you a little bit, there's a little bit of that motivation too.
Yeah, and I've also been hearing on some of their shows like the impression that no one's using Java anymore. I can tell you that's flatly not true. I'm using Java Play right now, and if you remember from episode 21, Ben Morse is using Java Spring, I believe. So there's still active development. People are still using it. It's not, the old technology. It's in this one area of applets, it's very dangerous, and you shouldn't be using it there.
Yeah. I have it disabled in all my browsers now.
Right, for sure. I mean, that's what you should be doing.
And you know what? And honestly, like on some Linux systems, I have Java installed, but it's not in the path. So before I run a Java application, I export the path to where the Java executable is, and then I run the application. And that's just an extra. I just do that because I have multiple versions of Java anyways for different applications. But, I mean, that's another consideration is you can do that. And
Nogel is pointing out correctly that, in some of the tech blogs, that's, of course, the startup space, the very, shall we say, hip space. Enterprise is ruled by Java.
A vulnerability that affects every single operating system that is widely deployed. There's already code being taken advantage of. A, that is actually a pretty important thing that people need to know about. But B, that's a freaking juicy story. That's just a juicy story. You got
I
a
just
big
wish
company.
At the end of the story they told them, "Oh, disable Java in your browser, and you're good to go."
Right. The good guys do that, but I have not seen that very much.
So I think we've beaten this horse to death. I have a tool this week.
All right. What is it?
Now, I'm bending the definition of tool. So Stan, a listener of the show, has started the Greenhorn Developer Podcast. I'm sorry, the Greenhorn Developer Journal.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's nice. He's So I listened to his first show. Apparently, the guy worked as a cowboy for a while, which is epic.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's a very, I think it would complement the show a lot because I know, based on the email, sometimes I gloss over things. Um, he's learning development. This is aimed at newbies or perhaps people coming from other careers into software development. And I listened to their first episode. They had Ben Morris as a guest star. By the way, follow me on Twitter, not Ben Morris. Check Google Plus if you want to know why. Little competition.
Okay, all right.
And it's just the format's pretty good, and the shows are pretty lengthy. So if you have a long commute, I think the last one clocked in at about an hour 30. This is a great. It's very entertaining though. They keep it moving.
Oh yeah, no. Our last just clocked. Last and TechSnap often. Well, hell, this show sometimes clocks in an hour and 30.
Yeah.
Oh, and look, he made his tool. He has a great pick for his first tool of the week.
Yes, I agree. Code Journal.
Yeah, that's really nice. Well, good for him. Good looking site too.
Yeah, it's very. I gotta ask him if he made that or if that's a template.
I like it. Yeah, and so it's called Greenhorn Developer Journal, and you can go to greenhorndeveloperjournal.com to catch it. And he's a listener of the show.
Yes, he is.
Very cool. It's always nice to see guys in our community going out there and starting their own thing. A nice little creative endeavor. I like it, and it'll be good to see it from the beginner's perspective for some folks. Well, very nice, Mr. Dominic. I believe that brings us to the end of this week's show, doesn't it?
It does.
Holy moly. All right, folks. Well, there's a few basics we should cover. You might have noticed, you may have been observant and realized that we have a live chat room that accompanies this show. Well, guess what? Coda Radio is live on Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern over at jblive.tv. And we'd love it if you join our chat room because then you can interact with us while we're going. You also star in the video version of our show. Mr. Dominic, where should people find you throughout the week?
They can find me on Google Plus or at Twitter at Dumanuko. Please follow me on Twitter. It's where I keep things up to date. Or they can find me at mdominic.com.
Very nice. And we have links to his social network profiles and mine in the show notes. You can follow us there to get midweek updates and things like that. And email the show, coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit that contact link. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Coda Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.